Hi everybody. So today I'm going to start off with the physics of AAA. Did you know that there's something called the physics of advanced audit and assurance? Now, physics is actually the study of energy and matter over space and time and how they interrelate with one another. So I'm not referring to the physics that we did when we were doing the O levels or anything like that. Yeah, we're not talking about gravity down here. But what I'm saying is that the principles of physics can actually be applied to advanced audit and assurance. What particular principle are we talking about? What concept are we talking about? We're talking about the concept of building a momentum. And we learned about this when we were doing physics for O levels. You might have done that, okay? For the AAA paper, it is also equally as important to build a momentum to prime you for success in this paper. Now, when you talk about building a momentum here, we're talking about three specific things. What are the three things? The first one is obtaining the knowledge of the paper. Knowledge simply means the details, the standards, the auditing standards, the 36 requirements of the ACCA code, and the rest of the syllabus for AAA. So obtaining the knowledge and then obtaining the understanding of it. And understanding is slightly different from knowledge. Understanding is more to do with being able to apply that knowledge to the different scenarios. So understanding is really very important because understanding is actually the force multiplier of your knowledge. What do I mean by that? Like, for example, you can have a knowledge of something and let's just give it a random figure of 1. Okay, if you have understanding of how it applies, where it does not apply, then your knowledge is multiplied by 10. So if you only have that knowledge going into the exam, you would only have 1 without the understanding. But if you have the understanding of it, it is multiplied by 10, meaning that for knowledge, you have got 1. For the understanding, you've got 10. And straight away, you've got 11. So can you see how understanding of the content of our syllabus, the knowledge, is actually a force multiplier? It's amazing just having that understanding. So here, we have got a multiplication sign here. And that's important for you to understand. Okay, we're talking about understanding here. Understanding means being able to apply that knowledge, knowing when you can apply the knowledge and knowing when you can't apply that knowledge. All right, well, how it will not be applicable for that particular scenario. And there is another element in building that momentum, and that is remembering the information. All of that allows you to move into a position where you actually have momentum, where you're building momentum. So you've got knowledge, understanding, and remembering. So for short form, let's just use KUR. Okay? Now, knowledge, understanding, and remembering is not the same as recognizing a particular topic. It's not the same. Okay, it's not the same as recognizing a topic. In the AAA paper, we have got so many topics. We have got 34 requirements of the auditing standards plus the ISQC1. We've got 36 requirements of the ACCA code. And of course, you've got your 35 IFRSs that you bring forward from your earlier papers. And you've got the rest of the syllabus. So you sometimes can recognize it because you've seen it before. Where have you seen it? Maybe you've seen it in your AA paper. Maybe you've seen some of it in your FR paper, your financial reporting paper. And of course, when it comes to accounting standards, you have seen it in your SBR. Having that earlier knowledge is good, the examiner says. But you know what? Having that earlier knowledge can also be bad. Let me explain. Because you have done these standards before, you know, your accounting standards in your FR and your SBR, and you have done the auditing standards, well, at least You have done 30 of them in your AA, 4 extra in your AAA. So because you have done it before, you recognize the topic. So this one can be good, but this one is only good if previously when you're doing AA or FR or SBR, you were following the principles of physics or building a momentum. That when you were studying those subjects, you accumulated that knowledge, you understood how it worked, and you remembered them as well. And that's good. However, if you have done those earlier papers, and of course by the time you come to AAA you would have, but you had not followed having knowledge, or you had scanty knowledge, or you had the knowledge but you did not have the understanding, or you had the understanding and then now you cannot remember, yeah? So you don't have this, then having that prior knowledge is bad, because when you look at I-37, you're like, yeah, I've seen it before. I've seen it in FR, I've seen it in SBR, I've seen it in AA, I've seen it. You recognize it, but you don't understand how it works. So in your earlier papers for your AA, your FR, and your SBR, which the examiner says is going to be really valuable for you going forward into this exam, you find that even those people who have got this knowledge sometimes fail AAA. How does that work? Well, I've been cracking my head trying to think about how a student who has got so much background knowledge still struggles in AAA. And I've come to the conclusion that when they were studying this paper, they did not follow these principles. So when they come to the AAA paper, they just recognize it, they see it, and they recognize it. Let me give an example. Supposing you drive a car, yeah? And maybe if you open the bonnet, you can see the engine inside, and you recognize that's an engine. It's not a cat, it's an engine. You can recognize that. And then you find that just because you recognize it doesn't mean you know it, does not mean that you understand how it works. For example, if I took the whole engine out, would you remember how to put it back together again? No, but you can recognize it's an engine. It's not a cat. It's not a dog. It's an engine. It's a car engine. Yes, you can recognize that. So having that prior knowledge gives you the false impression that you know I-37, that you know IFRS 5, that you know ISO 610. Yeah, you've seen it before, so you recognize it. You know what it looks like. It's a car engine. It's not a cat. But how it works, that's a problem. So what happens is that, I mean, if you're in this category here, that is really excellent. But if you are not in that category, now how do you know which category you're in? Well, if you, let's say, passed your AA, and let's say you just scrape through, maybe you've got 51 or maybe 55 kind of a thing, or in your FR, you also just managed to barely scrape through. And in your SBR and FR, the same thing, you just barely scrape through. And the reason why you scrape through is because you're really lucky that there was certain questions that you prepared for, they appeared. And if it was a different bunch of questions, you may not have gotten it right. I mean, there's not much difference between a student who got 49 and a student who got 50. The only difference is that the student who got 50 happened to study that particular topic and happened to put 1 extra point down. So you find that these kind of people here are now trying to do AAA, and they are struggling with passing this paper. So having that earlier knowledge, understanding, and remembering is good if you had done that. But if your earlier papers you had not done that, can you imagine the amount of baggage that you need to carry now? Because now we need to go back here. I mean, I'm not asking you to go back to your old textbooks and all that. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that now you have to take the time and trouble to get that knowledge, that understanding, and that remembering. And remember that word understanding is a force multiplier. It is a force. All right. So if you are only at the recognizing stage, that means you only recognize that this is an engine and it's not a cat. Yeah. At least you know it's an engine and it's not a cat. What will happen in the exam is that you are setting yourself up to only be a borderline case. You may be on 49, you may be on 50, depending on your luck. We do not want that. We want a situation where if you prepare for the exam, you are going to pass the exam. And the key here is a word called momentum, building a momentum. Let me give you a story here. I use a highway here in KL, Malaysia. And this highway here, from the main highway, it goes up. Yeah, there's a bit of a hill, and then after that it comes down here. So this is a highway, okay? And just as you are going up this hill, the speed here is 40 km. It's really ridiculous. So I slow down my car because, that's the law. We are accountants. We follow the rules. We follow the law. So I slow down my car, and that's my tiny little car there, and that's me driving. And then I look in the rear mirror, and there is this huge juggernaut coming at me. Really huge. And I'm like, oh God, save me. And straight away, I put my hazard light, okay? Because I want this truck driver, this trailer, this juggernaut to be able to see my little car and my light so that they don't go over me. But they're coming at tremendous speed, maybe at 120, maybe at 150 km. And he sees my light, thank God, and he moves to the right lane. In Malaysia, we drive on the left lane in the slow lane, all right? So the fast lane is the right lane. So he goes onto the right lane, and he's speeding, and I'm thinking, what the heck is he doing? But you know what? What he's doing is surviving. He needs to go at maybe 110, maybe 130. He needs to go at that speed to be able to make it to the top. If he is driving his vehicle at 60 km, he would get stuck somewhere here. So he needs to build that momentum. And as he goes up this hill, you can see the guy slowing down, really slowing. And by that time, I've already caught up with him. And when he reaches the top here, then gravity takes over and he goes down, zoom. And I am still up here following 40 km. All right, because that is the law. You wouldn't want a policeman to stop you and give you a ticket, right? So this juggernaut here is driving based on the principles of physics. He is using that momentum. So momentum really is the key. So what is the formula for momentum? If you remember from your physics class, momentum is P is equal to mass multiplied by velocity. Now, this is not a physics class, but what I'm saying here is that what we want is that momentum, right? And in order to have that momentum, you need to have your basic knowledge, just basic knowledge first. Then you need to make sure that you understand where it works, where it does not work. And this is where your past year question practice comes in, because you'll be able to see how it is applied in different scenarios. And then after that, there needs to be one more step, which a lot of students forget to do, and that is remembering that information. So you find that after they study and they close the book, they've forgotten it. And the next time they do another exam question that is similar, they've just forgotten how it applies. So in order to have that momentum to be able to drive you to the top of the hill there, you need momentum. Without momentum, you'll be stuck down here. You'll be stuck in a borderline case. So you need to be aware of that. Even in sports, you can see this, the guy who does the high jump or the long jump, or the guy who is throwing the shot put. They are all creating momentum. Without momentum, you cannot go far. Without momentum, you are at the borderline case. With momentum, you can go so much further. But you need to make sure that you build that momentum into your studying. So most of the time students have got this, but the problem is that they are only able to recognize the topic. They do not, a lot of students do not or are not able to get that. Now, how do you know whether you understand? Let me give you an example. Like when we have a question it's an audit procedure question, you find that generally students in an audit procedure question, they will straight away put down written representation, obtain written representations from management to confirm this. And they have not understood when written representations come in. Written representations can only come in, written representations will only be considered valid evidence if it is an area of subjective judgment, or if it is an area where the matter is confined to management, that only management know about it. So you need to know where it can be applied and when it cannot be applied. When is it considered to be valid audit evidence, when it is not considered to be valid audit evidence, so that you can apply it. And of course, you need to make sure that you remember it in the exam as well, to make sure that you are able to apply it in the exam. If you understood it and if you've forgotten it, that would be terrible. So in order for you to build that momentum, 3 elements are in there. And understanding is the force multiplier. You have to remember that. Without understanding, you cannot apply. And it is also that the more you understand, the more you remember as well. So what are the matters that are confined to management? You have got things like intention. Like if you're auditing investment property, then that intention of management to hold that property for capital appreciation of a rental would be important. Or for example, you've got a going concern question, then confirming the intention of management that they are not going to cease trading would be important. Where else can you use this? Where you have got management's intentions, management's plans here. Those are some of those areas, matters confined to management. Now, for this area here, you might not have it in the board minutes, but even if you have it in the board minutes, we want management to confirm it in black and white. All right, because in the board minutes, the way they write the minutes is different from in the letter of representation, because in the letter of representation, they always say, we confirm. So we want that. Okay? So we have got this thing called momentum. Now, near my house over here, there's a little park here, and well, it's a sort of circular park with a pond in the center here, so it's really quite nice. But there's one part in the park where they have got this little bit of a, well, it's a tiny hill, but still, considering my age and the fact that I'm not so fit after the 2-year lockdown, I haven't been exercising. All right, so when I run here, the only way that I'm able to get over this hill is if I sprint over here. If I don't sprint, then by the time I come here, I'm gonna die already. Okay, and of course, coming down that little ant hill is really a very tiny hill. Coming down the hill is not so bad because you've got gravity pulling you down, so that's absolutely brilliant. And then of course you suffer going around the park again, jogging again. But coming down to the ant hill again, I call it an ant hill because it's really quite tiny, but I'm so unfit. So I have got to sprint here in order to be able to make it up here. And that's what I'm saying. You need to make sure that you build in the momentum. So what we're doing today is I will show you how you can get that knowledge, get that understanding, and remember stuff, how it applies to audit reports. And that is what we are going to do. So building this momentum takes time, just like exercising takes time. And the point down here is last minute cramming will not allow you to build that momentum. So if you don't have momentum, what will happen is that you're a borderline case. You could be on 49, you could be on 50. Hopefully you're on the right side of the borderline, but there's no guarantee because there's no momentum to carry you into the 60s and 70s. In order to do that, you need to have knowledge, understanding, and remember that knowledge as well. Now, just to show you a little bit, this is the examiner's report from the 2021, the most recent examiner's report. And I want you to have a look at some of these words inside here. It says, the one that I've colored in blue, the examination requires a sound understanding of the syllabus. And a lot of students, they confuse the word understanding with the word knowledge. Knowledge is not understanding. Understanding is understanding how it works and how it applies to a scenario. And the only way that you can get understanding is by adequate practice of past questions. We've got so many different scenarios. And if you look at the second paragraph here, it says marks awarded at the AAA level are for application of the knowledge. So when you talk about application of knowledge, if you look at the sound understanding, it's in blue. Application of the knowledge is also in blue. So it's not just knowledge alone. It says where candidates demonstrate an understanding of the knowledge. So application is to do with understanding. The only way you can know whether you can apply it or not is by doing lots of past questions and having a variety of scenarios. Okay, now if you go and have a look at the pink bit here, it says a common feature of weaker answers in this subject is the use of rote learned knowledge. So they're stuck at the knowledge bit. They haven't gone to the understanding bit. So when they see the scenario, they are lost as to how they can apply it. And these are the borderline cases. You could be 49, you could be 50. And the only difference between 49 and 50 is just your luck in that exam as to whether you covered that particular topic and you're able to get that extra 1 mark or not. But with just knowledge alone, it's impossible to move into the 60s and the 70s, and that's what we want. We want to make sure that when we sit for the exam, that we are ready to pass it, and you need momentum for that. So it says here, the syllabus and the study guide for AAA sets out a high level of understanding required for this exam. And the pink one again, simply listing knowledge without explaining its relevance or the purpose, I mean, that's understanding, will not be sufficient to pass the exam. Like, for example, when you're dealing with audit procedures here, I put a box there in red. It says you need to put down the purpose. So when you're designing your audit procedures, we always start off with a verb. Yeah, because audit procedures and action. Then we need to look for a reliable source of evidence. And the next thing is we need to look at the objective of the test. So when you're looking at the objective of the test, you are showing that you understand how the test works because there's an objective behind it. So if you're doing audit procedures without understanding the objective, you'll end up putting lots of wrong audit procedures down. And under the objective, you usually have got those words to confirm, okay? But the words to confirm alone does not mean that you are going to get that 1 mark. Your objective has got to be relevant. And the only way that you can get that 1 mark is through understanding. And on the area of ethics as well, there's another area here where knowing the name of the ethical threat alone, like self-review threat or self-interest threat alone, will not gain you any marks, the examiner says, unless you explain how the threat will affect the behavior of the auditor in the scenario. Again, it speaks about understanding. So memorizing is not good. Now, memorizing is different from remembering. I'm not asking you to remember word for word. That is called memorizing. But whatever that you study, you have to remember, because if you don't remember, then it will not be a resource that is available to you in the exam. And understanding is very important because it will help you to understand the scenario. It will help you to understand the requirement. It will help you to understand what the examiner is getting at or trying to get you to do. You will have that insight if you have that understanding. If you don't have the understanding, again, you are just recognizing the topic and you will struggle in the exam. So going forward, we've got another few weeks more to go for the next exam. Make sure that when you get that knowledge, do the exam question without memorizing anything, but trying to understand how it works. So you write down your answer, you mark your answer, you tally your marks, you look at what the mistakes are made, and those mistakes represent the areas where you have got a poor understanding. Fix that, and after 4 days, come back and try that question out again. That would be good. All right? So that understanding would also help you to apply the exam technique. So let's get on to looking at building the momentum for our paper.